Hello, hello. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about my daily/weekly tasks that I do inside of Google Ads. This is going to be my general SOPs, so we're not going to go into like specific brainstorming, strategy, or anything of that nature. We're just going to focus on the actual sweat equity, meaning that we're just, what are we putting into the account to get the results they want in the future kind of thing. And so this is what I would do for my own business, for your business, my team would do it. This is sort of our general best practice, and I'm going to pretty much give you guys the examples of that. So this is, like I said, the baseline of it all. So search terms and placement. This is the first place that I like to look at. Now this will be on larger accounts pretty much every single day. I'll look at yesterday's numbers and then look at the search terms and then pretty much, see if we're still showing for quality search terms or if there's more brand in there, if we're placing in, the first position or not, and sort of look and see if there's anything that sort of stands out as this shouldn't be in here. This is a really fast process because most of the time whenever you're on conversion-based bidding, you're more so just looking at the search terms and you're not really trying to specifically like look for anything beyond, for example, branded terms or competitor terms that might not convert if you have a lead gen client. Competitive terms can still work really well, but it kind of depends on where the account is at in the first place. So with that being said, placement is also something that I just want to also briefly look at on if there's competitors that are starting to come into the market more. Then that is something that I'll check, I would say probably on a weekly basis just to see the trends and see if it's consistent or not. If you're seeing that on brand, you can see it a lot more consistently if you're on manual bidding, and you'll be able to react pretty quickly on the placement as well as making sure the search terms are not going beyond the branded terms. So pretty straightforward on that. I really like to look at, as you can see here, absolute top impression share and then impression share, just to give me an idea as to what is going on with that search terms on how you placed. Okay, so before I look at anything inside of Google Ads, whether it's conversions or ROAS or click-through rate, or I'm not concerned about that at all right now, because my main goal is to get the client more results for their P&L, right? Like, what is happening in the business? Is this getting better or is it not? Now, I like to look at this on a weekly basis. I typically would like to do this with the client just so I can understand exactly what's going on inside of the business, whether there's a sale or something else is going on. We also take that time to talk more about strategy and come up with new ideas to help grow the business. So we give a little extra instead of just Google Ads, we go beyond that. And we think this is really important because what we see in accounts that works really well can be carried over to other businesses, and that will affect the P&L. Now, this is obviously a lead gen one. So for example, right here, you'll see, and I covered this in a previous video, but Google and Facebook, we have total spends here for the week, added up, total leads that are qualified, ideally qualified. If we can't, then we'll just do leads, cost per lead or cost per qualified lead. And then if we can get the data from them, the close rate. Typically, this is a little bit of a lag based on the lead gen that you're doing. So if you're, for example, a chiropractor, that's going to be a lot faster than if you're selling houses, right? Like if you're selling a house, it's going to be a really, really long lag time. So you have to be very smart on how you look at the P&L. And this is, like I said, a very, very basic P&L. It's like, I wouldn't even call it a P&L. I would just say this is general like marketing sheet, I guess you can say. But this is sort of the baseline sheet that everyone should have first. So with that being said, the lag time between different types of businesses is going to affect how you look at this, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. However, you should still keep an eye on this if you have live data beyond just the spreadsheet. It's a lot easier to see, for example, your qualified leads every month, or if the client's telling you that through an automation, whatever the case is. Very, very important. The next thing that I want to cover is the e-com P&L. So this is, I would say, marketing sheet is a better way to say it, like I was saying earlier, but super, super simple. Looking at this pretty much week over week, or if they have imports of live data that are being updated, I'll look at that daily. And this is typically something that I'll do, same sort of story as I was saying previously, where if there's enough data, I'll look at yesterday's information and then use that to better understand what's going on a day-to-day basis inside of the account. If we're looking at making large sweeping changes, then I'll look at things on like a weekly or monthly basis based on the time lag that we're seeing on whenever we make a change, and then what does that do to the business, right? Because it takes time to educate someone and then have them convert. It's not just you put in ad spend and immediately you see results. It's education, they, come back multiple times and then they end up purchasing. And that all varies based on your type of business. So we have to be very, very aware of that. I think that's one of the most important things whenever you're making decisions on how often you're going to be looking at these marketing sheets. So same kind of story, like I was saying. If you don't know what NCAC-MER or NMER is, I would recommend watching my other video on that. But anyways, this is probably the most important thing to look at whenever you're scaling ads and looking to see the health of the ads themselves. Okay, so now this is a very, very important topic. So earlier on in accounts, I like to look, and my team likes to look at, basically if we're showing, like I was showing you earlier, the placements are good, the keywords are good. If it's a brand new account, we don't have much data, so we're just looking at, are we placing good in the first place? Then we look at the P&L, understand where they're at, and then move from there. When we establish a pattern, which is typically within the first month, we see on a new account, when we are looking at ads, we'll notice that, okay, in order for us to get, for example, over here, $30 for a new customer, our cost per acquisition inside of Google can be $91, let's just say. Now, I know there's other channels and I know there's a lot more noise going on, but I'm trying to look for some consistency in the account. And so when we've established that consistency of, on average, we're looking at a $91 CPA that's driving, let's say, a $30 NCAC, and that's at goal. If I see the CPA go above week over week, the benchmark that we have set for it, which is $91, if this jumps to $150, I'm going to then say, okay, I see this benchmark is up. What happened on the P&L? And if I notice, for example, that inside of the P&L, that the NCAC goes up to $50, let's say, so we're paying more for a new customer, and I see that the cost per acquisition inside of Google goes up, let's just say $20 or whatever the same percentage is, then I will say, okay, there is a correlation between Google Ads and your cost to acquire a new customer. And the reason why I do it that way is because there's so much noise going on that we have to make sure that we're able to find some kind of pattern to base these numbers off of. Because you don't want to just look at that and say, okay, for example, our cost to acquire a new customer is $91 inside of Google. So I'm worried now, I can't pay $91 for that. Most marketers say that. They say, oh, it's $91. That's too much. I can't pay for that. But then you look at the back end of the business and you say, oh, we're only paying $30 for a new customer. A lot of times that's the case where you're saying, okay, in platform looks completely different than what is happening on the back end of the business. Now, sometimes it can be reversed. And this is in a scenario where maybe you have a lot more return customers that Google is attributing more conversions to, right? So like the brand campaign, let's just say, I think this is the brand campaign. Yeah, it looks like it, one of these two. So we know as marketers that brand is not generated on its own. It comes from a source. Someone has to type in your brand. And so we know this 2,374, thousand ROAS is not scalable because we know it's repeat customers or it's from a source that's not generating new traffic from what we see. The same philosophy applies to all of these other campaigns consistently across the board. And this is why we've been so successful, is because a lot of marketers don't see, they look at a high, let's say, cost per acquisition and aren't happy about it. And then they trim back budget, and that's their wall now of success. And the reality is there's so much traffic out there that is not tracked properly that you can see good results from a incremental process, right? So you make a change, and then you see what that does to these numbers over here, given enough time, like a week, let's just say. And so that's why it's so important to have this sheet, because this is the core of everything in the decision-making process for daily and weekly checks. I would say daily is a little bit more on placement, but still we base it off of this. Okay, so once we establish the benchmarks, we can then look at that on a weekly basis. But if you want to look at, for example, click-through rate or something that's further up the funnel, not necessarily further down the funnel, like a conversion, so like leading indicators like click-through rate, cost per click, volume of clicks, overall spend, then that's totally fine on a daily basis. But if we're looking at conversions and cost per acquisition, that becomes a little bit of an issue because sometimes the algorithm will prospect and start to shoot out ads that aren't necessarily going to get people to convert right away, but they're going to make people aware of your product or service, and then they'll convert later in the process. So we just want to give it enough time for that to happen before we judge benchmarks on this. It's like the stock market. Okay, so why I don't trust Google in the first place. So these are examples of CAPI imports via edge tag versus the standard conversion tracking inside of Google. This is a large account, and this is what we've seen. For example, this is server imports on new customers only. So when you have a business, if you're in e-commerce especially, you have new customers and repeat customers. The repeat customers are LTV, so your lifetime value that just go through no matter what kind of thing. New customers are in essence more expensive, and they're going to grow your business. They're more valuable. And so what we do over here and what we can see is on a new customer rate, it's able to track 3,466 on just a standard Google shopping purchase integration. We're looking at 699 or 700, 654, 567. So these are 3 different types of conversion actions that are being shown that are not necessarily showing as much information as the reality of, what's happening. And this is due to cookie degradation. There's so many, this is a whole other topic, but this is an example of the differences between if you have proper tracking versus improper tracking. And there's so much missed data, as you can see here, on standard tracking that it just becomes ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that in every scenario it's this ridiculous, because this client specifically has a very high LTV. So this is gonna, attribute a lot of return customers as well. But we can see on the new customer side of things that it has missed a ton of traffic. And this is something that a lot of people don't fully understand. They miss the mark when it comes to looking at in-platform metrics. So like I was saying earlier, keep in mind that whenever you're looking at these in-platform metrics, look further up the funnel on the actions, like the clicks, the impressions, the cost per click, the placement on more of a daily basis. And then once you have your benchmarks figured out, and you have all of the P&L or the marketing sheet figured out, then you move into looking at, okay, with good results, I'm seeing that I can sustain a cost per acquisition in Google at $91. I'm going to look at that on a weekly basis. So you want to layer in these different days that you check stuff. So with that being said, this is sort of the general optimization metrics that I look at, and then obviously, whatever I see, I'll make an adjustment, whether it's ad copy, changing the keywords, adding negative keywords, checking the conversion actions. I will also do on a weekly, sometimes I would say bi-weekly, or as in twice a week basis. And as well looking at the e-com product to make sure that's firing. So I'll look for those general things to confirm if I'm looking at benchmarks and I see something that is maybe a little off. Then I'll be like, okay, I looked at the overall P&L. I looked at the benchmarks. Oh no, benchmarks look way off, but the P&L looks the same. Something probably happened on tracking. Something's going on, and then I'll dive more into it. So this is sort of the starting point, and then that leads to a whole plethora of other things that can come into the equation to essentially give you more context as to what's going on. A quick example of that would be they ran a sale, right? A sale, and all these benchmarks and numbers get completely messed up. For the better, but it's one of those things where you just have to kind of work through with the client. And so it becomes a little difficult, and then you go back in and just making sure they're placing properly and that you're profitable on the P&L side. So with that being said, I think that this is a good starting point for media buyers out there to understand what is going on and what are the correlations. And then from there, use all of your skills essentially to better address the account and give it more information to push it in the right direction, whether it's ad copy, keywords, changing the conversion action, talking to the client, different offer, all that kind of stuff. But it always starts with the traffic first, and then it moves into everything else. So thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.